American Hot Rod Foundation, Steve Gibbs interview, scene 3.
So as we're talking about the hot rod reunions,
Well, 2016 was going to be the 25th annual Hot Rod Reunion. 25 years, that's a pretty serious accomplishment. And there had been growth all through that. I mean, the reunion was generating a good amount of money to the museum. And for the first few years, NHRA proper almost had a hands-off approach to they let us do it. They let the museum run it. We ran it. I think we did a good job. This Cackle Fest thing had come along in 2000, and it was just kind of a spur of the moment thing that Greg Sharp and I one day we got talking about old cars and the push start thing, because we had quit push starting cars back in the 80s because they simply got too long and you just couldn't manage them anymore with the rear engine long wheelbase cars. Some tracks didn't have fire up roads. So when we got electric starters and all this, the push start thing went away. But if you go back far enough, that used to be a big part of the show. I mean, there was just something about that was kind of magical. That noise, to hear that kind of a hollow sound when, you let the clutch out before you hit that mag switch and thing would come to life and the car would move away. It was just something special about that. And a lot of guys they'd never even seen that done. Didn't even know we did that kind of a thing. So Greg and I, for the 2000 event, rounded up 8 cars. One car couldn't push start. We actually had 9 cars on the racetrack. It wasn't even on the schedule. I mean, it was just something that we threw in at the end of the day. We push started those guys. They all lined up on the track, and boy, it lit, a bulb, a bunch of heads. And guys were there that literally said, and they get tears in their eyes seeing that, I'm gonna build one of these. I'm gonna do this again. I'm gonna go find my old race car. It generated an emotion that we hadn't anticipated. I mean, there was no master plan on this thing. Over a period of time, there's been over 250 of these cars that have been, recreated, restored, replicated.
a couple of them are over your shoulder.
Here they are. That's a prime example.
Thanks to
Somewhere
Don Prieto.
Prieto must have got the bug to do this again. I mean, here's a chance to kind of do it again. I mean, we can't go out there and race. It's gotten too exotic, too expensive. But by God, I can have a hot rod. I can burn a little bit of nitro. I can hang out with my buddies. I can kind of relive that element of my life. And I think a lot of guys shared that. And I know they did. And so that had grown. In the year 2015, I had 58 cars that push started on Saturday night to do our Cackle Fest. It had turned into, I'd say, the main event of the reunion. It wasn't even part of the original reunions, but it had grown into a big part of the reunion, maybe not the main event, maybe other people were just there to visit and see old friends, but it was a big deal. The grandstands were pretty full on Saturday night when we did the Cackle Fest. The 25th annual reunion comes around, and this is going to be the biggest one yet. I mean, this is the silver anniversary of the Hot Rod Reunion. And guys were, Ross Preen was shipping his car from Australia to be a part of this. Guys were coming to that event that probably wouldn't come otherwise. It was a big deal to come to the 25th annual. A couple, 3 months before the event, I get a notification from the NHRA higher-ups, we got a problem. Really? What's the problem? Well, we just can't do this anymore. What? Run this many cars in this Cackle thing you do. It's just unsafe. You can't do it anymore. Really? I mean, we're going to change this right now? We're going to, and basically, yeah. It just...
And up until then, you've really just never heard from the higher up. It's
very little. Somebody, I suspect what happened. We've got a couple of people that are not real keen on the whole nostalgia movement. I think some people within the walls of NHRA just felt like that's not what we do. and they got more and more involved in it. They got more involved in the running of the museum from the business angle of things. We had a different director at the museum. And for whatever reason, I just think they wanted to get their fingers on the damn deal. So it got to the point, well, how many cars can we run? I had 58 last year. I've never been sued, never had a major accident, never had there's a risk. Obviously, there's a risk anytime you light an engine like this here. Could a car get into the fence on that fire approach? It's possible. I've never seen it happen. Yeah, it's possible. If you're that concerned, I got guardrail down there in the boneyard. We'll put up a section of guardrail down this fence. I got volunteers that'll do it. No, we're not going to do that. And they just basically said no. And it got to the point, I said, damn it, I got my fingerprints all over this thing. I'm a past Grand Marshal. This is a salute to the 25th annual deal. You guys have got a different idea about running this thing. You run it. I'm just going to go and enjoy it, okay? As a past, I'm going to be enjoy my role and not be actively involved in the production of it. Limit the cars, whatever you want to do, you run it. Trust us, we'll do it. Everything is wonderful. Enjoy it. Have a good time. Enjoy the event. Well, they thoroughly screwed it up. I mean, it was a mess right from day one when these guys pulled in there. I guess they had a meeting and was basically told these guys, you guys don't even know how to, they wouldn't even let them fire the cars up. I think there was a sheet handed out. Don may have one that basically says you can't even start the engines.
Like in the pits?
In the pits, nowhere. You cannot start those engines. Now, next thing there's another meeting. Well, you can start the engines only if there's an observer. I mean, it was just, it was pathetic what happened up there. I just kind of stood back and watched this whole thing go downhill. I mean, guys who went, there's a lot of guys who will not go back. I can name guys who will not go back to that event based on what happened in 2016. And when it was all said and done, it turned into be a disaster. The deal at the hotel used to be a big deal. I mean, we'd fire up cars out front. I think they had one car out there at the 25th annual Hot Rod Reunion at the hotel. I mean, I'm patting myself on the back, but I think my involvement in that carried a lot of weight, I guess. And I think when a lot of the outside guys could see what was happening, they took it bad. I think NHRA shot themselves in the foot by assuming they could do it better and with their new set of rules. And, I don't know if they honestly thought they were saving the world from some disaster. They've tried to put it back to exactly the way it was. I know that, so it couldn't have been too bad. They've gone back to the same Saturday night, pushed the cars just so it seems like that they've thought about it because it's affected their bottom line. That race is not the same as it was. It's been hurt. And the following year, early in the year 2017, I'm in a museum one day, and I kind of took the museum staff to task about the job they did at the reunion because they said, trust us, we'll do it right, trust us. The gal that was kind of become the organizer of the thing, she was still at the museum, and she's listening to me go on and on. I was bitching about it. I was really kind of unloading them. I thought that, well, they didn't want to hear it. They just didn't want to hear this old guy telling them what a terrible job they had done. So I was on a year-to-year contract with NHRA as a consultant. A couple of weeks later, they called me in and said, well, you got your contract for next year. In fact, we got it for the next 2 years. Really, that's maybe, things are getting better. And Graham Light, he handed me this contract and he said, there's probably a couple things in there you may not like. Really. Well, the money was the same. Not a huge amount of money, but enough to be a part of my, I was retired, but I was making enough as a consultant that it's a pretty big part of our budget. Well, it wasn't going to change, but they were only going to pay me 2/3 up until the end of the 2 years. And if I had been a good little boy, they were going to give me the lump sum of the third they were withholding just to see if I could, follow the rules. And you talk about non-disclosure kind of stuff. It had language in there I couldn't say. I mean, I couldn't do anything. It's just basically shut up, go sit in the corner. We'll pay you to sit in that corner and let us do this deal. And I looked at it. 48 years I've been with NHRA. I said, Graham, I can't sign this. I can't do it. Well, that was it. That was it. And I'd hoped to do 50 years. That was kind of my target, to do a 50-year thing with NHRA, even though part of those years were, again, just as a consultant. But we generated half of my salary that I was getting. We generated that from the auctions we did have. I was paying half of my salary, me and my daughter, but these auctions, every year, for 5 years in a row, I'd go in there for the director of the museum and give him over $25,000 in cash. Just here it is. You know, they didn't have to do a damn thing. I mean, we did that on our own. Between John Ewald, who played a big role in those original auctions, and guys that donated some really good stuff. I mean, there was good stuff at those original auctions. And we would net over $25,000 5 years in a row. I mean, that was more than half of what I was making. So, I mean, they shot themselves in the foot when they made it to the point. I mean, a lot of people say they let you go, they fired you. No, that's not true. I walked on my own terms. But I wasn't going to go along with what was laid in front of me. I was not going to do it. An attorney friend of mine read that contract. He says, quote, "This oozes with paranoia." I mean, that's, and it did. They didn't want me to be a factor in what they were doing. And the only way I could avoid that was to just leave. And that's, it's a shame because it's kind of thrown, I worry about my relationship with Greg Sharp. I love Greg Sharp, but he's not going to leave the museum. So it's kind of put us, you know, at odds over this whole thing. And I regret that because personally, there's no problem whatsoever. As far as other people with NHRA, I could give a rat's ass less about what happens to them or what they decide to do. I don't pretend to have all the answers to everything, but I think we were doing a good job at what we did, and we were making money for the museum. The museum was thriving, and I think we had a lot of honest interest and support out there. And now there's a lot of, I think, ill will.
Are you at the museum or at the reunions, or both?
Both. I think as long as the reunions, and they've tried to roll it back, okay? They've tried to undo the damage that was done, but they've never quite got there. I mean, it did some permanent damage. I think it's maybe gotten a little bit better, and they've tried to say the right things. I think they wrote some letters almost apologizing. But they screwed up. They screwed up. And the people that are running NHRA today are still the same people that let that happen. So it's a shame. There's a side of me, the Wally Parks NHRA, the museum, the reunions, there's a side of me with a loyalty to that'll never go away because I had a lot to do with it. But it's become something entirely different today to the point that we're doing our own little deal. We'll make our little niche and try to do some of the same things we tried to do up there. And we're getting by. We're having fun with our Nitro Revival thing.
It's a great thing.
This pandemic thing has obviously been a mess. But that little deal will be around for a while because we're actually trying to roll back what the reunion almost started out as, try to get back to that point, that same emotion, that same mentality. And it boils down to people more than anything else, you know. But the cackle cars are a big part of that deal. And the guys have invested a lot of money in these cars. They're saving history. I mean, they are literally saving the history of the sport. And to be treated that way at that event, I mean, they were just basically dismissed like you guys, you don't count. You don't count, you know. You guys don't maintain these cars well. You don't know what you're doing. I mean, it was an insult. It was an insult.
Yeah, I mean, when you went to the reunion in '16, what actually happened when you were there? I mean, because I'm sure a lot of guys assumed you're still running
Well,
it.
they did. I just tried to stay out of, I just kind of stayed out of the middle of things. I wasn't going to go make a big scene about any of this stuff. So my wife and I, we didn't even go up until Friday. Normally I'd have been up there most of the week, So we went up there. I just casually went in. We hung out with some friends in the pits. I was just there. I didn't, we went to the Friday night thing at the hotel, and they didn't even introduce me. I mean, it was just,
Oh my God.
it was just, the only way I got introduced was, well, this is actually, I'll take that back. At the 2016 thing they did, at the 2017 thing when I wasn't a part of it, I was at the hotel that night. I didn't even go to the reunion. I only went to the hotel to see the guys get the honors. And had not Kelly Brown even mentioned my name, there would have been not even any recognition of the guy that started this whole thing. It was just pettiness, I think, on their part. It's their game. They can do it the way they want. And, I'm sure they'll look at me and say the pettiness is on my part, But who knows? Who knows?
Was it, and I don't mean to grind away on this, but is it a thing where the NHRA, kind of being unsure of their future as producing big-time drag racing, they're looking at this other thing that's over here hitting on all cylinders and it's making money, and they've got this museum that maybe they don't really care about, and do you think that they just saw that as an opportunity and thought they'd come in and maybe we can do something with this? And
It could be. There was an attempt at one point to relocate the museum into the Peterson. We got called in one day and they presented this whole concept to us of actually shutting down the NHRA museum and moving it into the basement over Peterson, which told me right away that the upper management of NHRA could really give a rat's ass less about what the museum stood for and what we were trying to do. That never worked out, but it painted a pretty clear picture of me of what their commitment to the museum. Now you'll never hear that. I mean, they're committed, everything is wonderful, it's but the museum is not a big part of their thought process.
yeah,
And
because they're not. It doesn't sound like they're car people.
right. I don't know. It's a damn shame that things have gone the way they did. We had a good thing going at one time. The reunion supported the museum. Everybody was happy. But it's the old saying: if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, they decided they had to fix it, and they did, and it hasn't worked out. And I doubt they'll ever acknowledge that. I think denial is rampant within that organization.
Yeah, so let's talk about the Nitro Revival. That's something that somehow you were able to whip that up and get that on its feet within
when I walked
10
from
months of
when I walked from NHRA, I truly didn't know what was next. I mean, I'm obviously not involved with them anymore. A fellow named Ron Johnson, who had built like 3 different cackle cars. And he lived in Escondido, and we'd formed a good friendship. He basically said, "You need to do something. We can't let this die down. You got too good a following here. We got too many of these guys with these kind of cars that are obviously not real welcome over at NHRA anymore. We need to do something." And I said, "Hell, what? Where could we do something like that?" So we kind of come up with an idea of putting together a little event and come up with the name Nitro Revival. I mean, I got a lot of letters from NHRA said I could not use the word Cackle Fest, or I couldn't use the word reunion, or I couldn't use the word, tell me all this crap I can't do,
Dragster, oxygen, tire.
Yeah, it was just, threatening stuff. On one hand, how are you? We hope you're well, but don't do this and don't do that. And they had registered the name Cackle Fest, so Ron and I come up with an idea of doing an event. Well, the first place we thought about doing it was Irwindale, because it's central location. I mean, it's right here in River City. Well, at that time, Irwindale, they had a closing date. That place was going to go under in February of the following year. and they didn't have any dates left in 2017. So that was a dead end. And well, we finally settled on the little thing at Verona. And I mean, it's rustic, it's out in the middle of kind of nowhere, but it fits kind of what we're doing. And so Ron, had some money, and he said, I'll bankroll leasing the track for that weekend, which was not a huge amount of money. And you organize the thing, and we'll put it together. So that's a pretty simple deal. We obviously got contact with all the guys with these kind of cars, and the internet's pretty good about spreading the word. And we did the little thing at Verona, and it made a few dollars. They were pretty happy. The only thing about Verona, it was never going to get any better. I mean, it's kind of it's kind of dirty and dusty and not the easiest place to get to. Mm-hmm. And I just couldn't really see it going much beyond what that first event was. And then just out of the blue, we had some contact with Laguna Seca. And, a fellow that had worked for NHRA, Melvin Record, was working at Laguna Seca at the time, as was Brad Littlefield. And they got us in touch with the management at Laguna Seca. And so we did the second Hot Rod Nitro Revival at Laguna Seca. It was a pretty cool event. It did a good turnout. Financially, it probably pushed. I don't think anybody lost a lot of money on it. The road race folks accepted us. We had a great time up there. It was a nice event. We were going to go back to Laguna Seca the next year, and they entirely changed their management up there. They just, whole new deal. Mm-hmm. So well, here we are again. But in the meantime, Irwindale has gotten a fresh lease on life. So we contact Tim Huddleston, who's running Irwindale, and said, hey, he says, well, I know all about you guys. He had worked for Justice Brothers for a long time, so he actually manned the Justice Brother tent at the early Hot Rod reunions. So Tim was well familiar with what a reunion type event was about, and he was eager to have us come out there. And we did the one last year, and it went over pretty well. I think and it was tough for us because my wife had died just a couple of weeks actually before this thing happened, and so it was not an easy deal to do, getting through that time frame. But with a lot of help from a lot of people, we did it, and we were on the calendar for this year. And then this virus thing just screwed everything up. But we're solid at Irwindale. As soon as things stabilize to where we can get a date that we know we're going to be able to, do our deal, and we'll be back at Irwindale with Nitro Revivals. And Tim said as long as he's got the place, we're more than welcome to be a part of it. So that's kind of where we're at. It's not the biggest event in town, but it's I think it still has that kind of feel-good atmosphere. Old guys getting together. These guys are dying off. That's the sad part of this thing. Is so many of the guys that have really made this thing work, we're losing them on unfortunately a pretty steady basis. Now, it's kind of nice that there's some next generation guys that are kind of getting into it. My daughter, she loves what she's doing with it. I hope that when my time comes, if this thing is still alive and she can maybe keep it going, or whoever else is out there. I think there's a need for this kind of event, though, as long as there's people that want to go to these kind of events, and that's where we're at.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we're coming to the end of it.
Okay.
And I just want you to maybe share with us if you have some high points, some points of pride from your career.
Well, I do. I mean, and I've been recognized for it. I mean, I've been inducted into the Drag Racing Hall of Fame. I was given the Global Achievement Award by the British Hot Rod Association. I've been the Ollie Award, which was a big deal at that time. I mean, I've been recognized for my contributions to the sport, so that all feels good. And I can look back on things that I did that I can physically see. I mean, at the racetracks, I was the first guy to have concrete starting lines put in. I was the guy that shortened the Christmas tree. I was the guy that develop some of the procedures at the way national events run, the way they're qualified. I mean, I contributed a lot to this sport, and I look back on that, and I'm proud of that. I think that, and at the same time, I feel that whatever I took out of the sport, I'm more than put into it. I feel the books are, in some ways, maybe not even balanced compared to what I see some other folks later on got in, and I sometimes wonder how Sandy Koufax felt, when he had to struggle to get $100,000 to pitch, and now you got guys that sign a contract and make $10 million without even,
Yeah.
So that's maybe a silly analogy, but I do feel like if I'd have come along 10 years later, I'd have probably made a whole lot more money for doing a lot less. But but I'm proud of what I did. I'm proud of my role in the sport. I was a blue-collar guy that was given an opportunity by Wally Parks. I think I made the best of that opportunity and just happened to land on a time frame where it allowed a guy like me to do that. And I guess that kind of wraps it up, but it's been good. I mean, overall, if I sound like I'm complaining, well, I might be for a particular period of time and kind of the way things wrapped up. But overall, no. Overall, if you spread it out over all those years, pretty damn good. Pretty good.
Well, I sure agree. And we thank you for everything you've done for the sport. And in particular, for me, the Hot Rod Reunion is such a wonderful thing for a guy my age and anyone who's an enthusiast in my age group. It's an opportunity to see stuff, a version of what you got to see when
I guess it maybe
you were
reverts
first
back to my original involvement as a fan. And I think the Hot Rod Reunions is almost reliving that role all over again, of just being a fan,
Yeah.
being able to see these cars, see these guys in a nice circumstance and not get caught up in the politics and all the nonsense. So I think maybe I've gone full circle on this whole thing.
Well, and I was going to say, and even better, the Nitro Revival,
Well,
because that's the purest form of it. So,
it's been good, and we will do it again. I mean, it's
it's going to be great. I'm going to be taking my son to that, and hopefully he'll take his son.
well,
I mean it.
I look forward to when that happens. We'll come up with a date as soon as this damn virus thing clears itself up, and then that will happen. Things will settle back,
Oh yeah.
But thank you for, let me unload on some of this stuff here. But I guess some folks might want to hear about it.
Oh, they will. And we really do appreciate it. So thank you, Steve, for your time.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.